Good afternoon, everybody. My name is AWilliams. I'm a GT undergrad student, and I am enrolled in the course English 1102. So in this course, we were asked to dedicate ample time to a research proposal of our own choosing, with the only parameter of it relating to cities. We were asked what was the most intriguing to us about cities. Do they have misperceptions? Do they have myths? Or are they inherently good or bad? For my topic, I decided to focus upon three aspects of one's standard of living that homeowners should take into consideration before deciding where to settle down. Standard of living can be defined as the degree of wealth and comfort available to a person. So to measure standard of living, there's many capacities that you could choose. For this research project, I decided to focus upon three: education/education attainment, employment/unemployment, and overall happiness. So for this project, I'm going to compare these three factors within urban/rural areas. And obviously, there are some misconceptions and some myths that we all made up in our head just now when I asked you that, but you may be wrong. So firstly is education. Now, the assumption that we've probably all made in our heads is that rural education is worse than urban education. However, the problem isn't necessarily that the education is worse, that the teaching is worse. It's who's completing high school or not. In a general overview, historically, urban areas do have a higher share of individuals with bachelor's, postgraduate, and professional degrees. They have higher education attainment. In fact, in 2015, the share of adults living in the area with at least a bachelor's degree in urban areas was 33%, and in rural areas, 19%. Now, to ease into our next subject, it's relevant to point out that with your higher education attainment, comes a higher income. As far as unemployment/employment, in a study done in 2017 focused on the employment rates of veterans in rural/urban areas, it is proven that employment was higher in urban areas rather than rural areas by an average of 3.33%. Although most of us aren't veterans and this doesn't really apply to us, you can think of it as applying to a group. You can see that employment rates are higher in urban areas rather than rural areas. This is most likely the case just because statistically there are a higher population in urban areas, so there are more jobs. So if there are more jobs, you're statistically likelier to get one. Another point is since the 2007 to 2010 recession, it's been significantly harder for rural areas to catch up on their employment rates before the recession than their urban counterparts. If you can calculate the rate of change for them trying to get back to their employment rates, the average rate of change over 7 years for rural areas is 0.5% increase, and for urban areas it's a 1.8% increase. Our final point to point out is that although these facts I'll point out for something else, it's also relevant to state just simple facts that the unemployment rate in a population of 500,000 right now in Atlanta, the place that we live in, is 8.4%. And the unemployment rate in a small city that has a population of just over 6,000 people is 5.2%. Now, obviously COVID has definitely amplified all unemployment rates across the globe, but it's relevant to point out that not all cities are the same, not all rural areas are the same. So for my final topic, I'm going to talk about overall happiness. I put happiness in quotes because obviously it's an emotion and you can't really measure it. It's not measured quantitatively. It's just an overall idea. So I looked at many things. Overall happiness, you can use so many things like public transportation, crime rates, green space, supplies of goods and services, pollution, and so many other things. All of these are very different depending on rural or urban areas. But for this, I just focused on a couple. So on one note, it is easier to find a job in a city than in a rural area. And we found that the number of job opportunities is positively correlated with your happiness. Another thing I looked into is public transportation. So obviously public transportation is a bigger priority to urban areas considering that there's a lot more people to transport. But research shows that people in rural areas and urban areas are both equally happy with the amount of public transportation that they have available to them. So in actual suburban areas, people are less happy with this, but we're just focusing on rural and urban areas. So overall happiness, there is no point where you could say what is better depending on your happiness. They are both different, and overall happiness, they seem to both be happy in both areas. So as a closing statement, I want to point out a few key factors that I went over. So overall, urban areas have higher education attainment. They also have higher employment. And overall happiness, equally happy. So to make a restatement, not one trumps the other. That's not the point of this research project. Obviously, it's all about yourself, what you want, but it is important to point out the facts of the matter so that you can make an informed decision on where you want to live. So obviously, you want to take into consideration all of these things when deciding when to settle down. But in conclusion, not one trumps the other. These are merely just facts. Thank you for coming to my presentation.